الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا وشفينا وطبيب قلوبنا محمد وآله وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. We continue our reading of the truth about democracy. We are here now. Democracy is a tool of capitalist governance. Okay. All capitalist states, America, the erstwhile Soviet Union, China, India, are representative democracies. They are not direct democracies. Okay, the methods of representation vary, but the principle is the same. And the principle is that democracy should be the only legitimate form of democracy is a capitalist democracy. This principle is embroiled in the presumption that every adult person in the state is a capitalist individual. So earlier we talked about the people. So the abstract conception of the people and the actual people, and the distance between the abstract conception of people and the actual people, that comes into play here. So let us look at it a bit. Okay, so what happened to this? So the people invoked in democracy is the abstract conception or ideal type, and here the actual people. And most of the time what they're referring to as the people as an ideal type. And this ideal type, it is assumed that they are people who are capitalist. They have inculcated or they have embodied capitalist rationality. So they are all capitalist individuals. And in earlier times, only minority of actual people were the real rulers or the real people who were allowed to vote, was because they were the only one who came close to representing this abstract conception of the people. But once through education and through mass murders and through compulsion and other things, when these actually existing people came close to inculcating capitalist rationality, this gap became narrow. Although since the actual people can never really become totally capitalist, there's always the gap, there's always the danger that these people will deviate from this ideal prototype of the people. So when democracy assumes that these people are actually these people, that they have they are all capitalist individuals, they have inculcated the capitalist rationality. Okay, that's the assumption behind the representative democracy. So that's why when the actual people in times don't act like capitalist individuals, then they are actually no longer democratic people. For example, in Gaza or in Iran, or for example. So managed democracies, imperialist crafted democracy in Iraq is a real democracy because that's a capitalist democracy, or pseudo-democracy in Egypt is which is actually a dictatorship is a democracy because it plays by the rule of the capitalist elites or the capitalist system. But the overwhelming popular democracies, even when they are, I'm not saying today it is in Iran or Gaza, they are not democratic, because by democratic we mean the people are actually capitalists and they will act rationally, that is according to capitalist logic. In a sense you can understand this with the example of Iranian democracy. So if you say Iranian democracy is Islamic democracy, yeah, and Iranian democracy actually presumes that the people or the citizen is actually, or the voter, are all full-fledged Shia Muslims. That's its assumption of Iranian democracy. And without this assumption, that democracy won't work. And to the extent that the actual people in Iran, I'm not deviate from being the ideal Shia Muslim adults, then Islamic democracy has to use force and all those things, and in order to keep the actual people in line with the ideal people. Similarly, representative democracy or constitutional democracy assumes that the actual people, are all capitalist people. And this democracy works only on this assumption that actual people are capitalist people. And in developed countries, these actual people come close to being capitalist as much as it is humanly possible. Yeah. Through education, through propaganda, through media, all that, they inculcate capitalist rationality as much as possible. But obviously, when these actual people deviate in their preference from the capitalist rationality or presume capitalist rationality, then they have to be managed. They have to be coerced subtly or overtly, depending on how it is possible, in order to keep them in line with the policy dictates of the ideal people or the actual elite, because the actual elite is supposedly representing the people, but the people it is representing is these ideal prototype people, not the actual people. And it represents the actual people only to the extent that this actual people come close to the ideal people. So that was important, I think. So all capitalist states, America as well, Soviet Union, China, India, are representative democracies. Methods of representation vary, but the principle is the same. The principle is embroiled in the presumption, that's the assumption, that every adult person in the state is a capitalist individual. And that's the function of education and media and all those things, to inculcate capitalist rationality within people. And when we call the countries we call advanced democracies, they are developed and advanced democracies to the extent that the large majority of people in those countries have come close to the ideal people, close to inculcating or embodying the capitalist rationality. That's what it means. So the assumption that capitalist individuality has been universalized, that it has overwhelmed the actual people, and the gap between the ideal people and the actual people is minimized. Okay, it no longer remains confined to those who own capitalist estates. So minority in earlier democracies, these people were minority, but now this has been capitalist rationality through education and mass campaigns and socialization have become universalized. That's assumption. That's why the franchise is universalized in that sense. So it no longer remains confined to those who own capitalist states, the financiers, the industrialists, the state bureaucrats, the intellectuals. Every individual is expected to regard his body and soul and its associated labor power as capital assets, subsumed in capitalist properties. So as Locke argued in the early 20th century, 18th century, Locke said that my body, I own my body, and that's the basis of capitalist ownership, because I'm the owner of my body. What I produce with my body belongs to me as well. That was the basis of his labor theory of value. Anyway, the representative democratic state is the regime for the people, provided all the people of the I state is a capitalist individual. Provided, that's same. So if they actually deviate from that, then you have to, override their will, as for example during the Iraq wars. This means that in the eyes of such a people, the sole or main purpose of existence is the maximization of capital accumulation. That's what capitalist individuality is. The sole purpose of existence, society, state, is to accumulate for the sake of accumulation. The dedication of body and soul of the single dominant people to capital accumulation is known as rational. That is what rationality is. When the whole people of a country or the whole people of a continent or the whole people of this earth dedicate themselves to the sole purpose of capital accumulation, beginning with their body and their soul. So the body is your property in the sense that it's a means to accumulate for the sake of accumulation. And you are rational, otherwise you are irrational, like Locke said. Red Indians are irrational because they don't treat their body as capitalist property. That's why they should be killed or destroyed. That's God's will according to Locke. And that's why America obviously is a Lockean state in the sense that the Iraqis, the Vietnamese, the Afghans can be killed because they are irrational. They resist this dominance of the capital accumulation and the people and the rule of the people dedicated to capital accumulation. Okay. A capitalist individual is autonomous, self-determined. He determines his own self. Nobody else determines his self. But autonomous only to the extent to which she is rational. That is dedicated to capital accumulation, because that is a prerequisite for exercising your autonomy. Okay, she obeys the commands of his baser self, Nafs Ammara, and admits of no criteria for evaluating the moral worth of its command except the principle of universalizability. That's the Kantian principle. It is legitimate for him or her to do what his or her Nafs Ammara desires, provided this act does not inhibit other capitalist individuals from doing what their Nafs Ammara desires. So that's liberalism. This is how rationality rules autonomy. So you are autonomous, but you are autonomous only if you are ruled by rationality, and rationality demands that, let's spell this out. So the basis of capitalist individuality is the idea of self-determination. Every individual, you determine your own self. Your self is not determined by anybody else except you, not even by God. So you are your own God in this. That's what we call autonomy. Okay, so every individual is autonomous. But to be autonomous, you need to be rational. If you are not rational, you are not autonomous. You are irrational. You are Muslim, or you are Christian, or you are Red Indian, for example. They are all heteronomous people because they are not dedicated to the idea of autonomy. That is, they are not rational. And what does rationality means? Rationality means the rationality principle is the principle that everybody pursue their desires as long as it doesn't interfere with the similar right of any other individual. So that's nafs. So it is rational to follow nafs ammara. That's what autonomy is. And in order to follow your desires, what you need is, and that's the implication of or requirement of rationality as well, that in order that you be autonomous, that yourself is determined by yourself and not anybody else, and you can fulfill all your desires, what you need is resources. And only limit on your will and your desire is the scarcity. So what we need is abundance and overcoming of scarcity. And the way to do this is capitalism. That's why autonomous individual is necessarily a capitalist individual, and it is irrational to resist capitalism. It is irrational to adopt any other stance but capitalism and dedicate individual, society, and state to capital accumulation so everybody can become autonomous. That's the idea. So a capitalist individual is autonomous, that is self-determined, but autonomous only to the extent to which he/she is rational. He/she obeys the command of his baser self, nafs ammara, and admits of no criteria for evaluating the moral worth of its command, that is the command of nafs ammara, except the principle of universalizability. And the principle of universalizability is the principle that you are allowed to pursue your desire as long as you accept the similar right of all other individuals and don't interfere into those rights. It is legitimate for him or her to do what his or her nafs ammara desires, provided this does not inhibit other capitalist individuals from doing what their nafs ammara desires. This is how rationality rules autonomy. The capitalist individual is a beast, Havan, because when nafs ammara rules you, then you are a beast. But a rational beast who respects the capitalist rights of other beasts to fulfill the commands of their nafs ammara. Okay, let's stop here and we'll continue from here. Probably we'll need one more session, inshallah, to finish it off.